Record. All right. So is reincarnation so is a...
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead, Heidi.
Is reincarnation so? My question is, I thought that the Course is teaching us to stay in the moment, and only the moment is real and exists.
Yes.
So why would we even care about reincarnation or talk about it if it doesn't exist and it's not now?
You're right, Heidi. That is what we're going to find out today. That you're basically summarizing the point of view. Nevertheless, many people have this past learning about reincarnation, and so these are questions that people have. What do I do with that teaching? And so it merits some attention because for many people, the teachings about reincarnation have been something they were raised with and have come to believe in. And so I think by the time we finish this section, it'll be really clear for you.
Okay, thank you.
So with that, we're going to begin our reading, and I want to thank Brother David for being our reader today.
Is reincarnation so? In the ultimate sense, reincarnation is impossible. There is no past or future, and the idea of birth in a body has no meaning either once or many times. Reincarnation cannot then be true in any real sense. Our only question should be, is the concept helpful? And that depends, of course, on what it is used for. If it is used to strengthen the recognition of the eternal nature of life, it is helpful indeed. Is any other question about it really useful in lighting up the way? Like many other beliefs, it can be bitterly misused. At least such misuse offers preoccupation and perhaps pride in the past. At worst, it induces inertia in the present. In between, many kinds of folly are possible.
Mm-hmm. So in a way, this addresses Heidi's question right up front, in that in the ultimate sense of eternal reality, of completion beyond time and space, then reincarnation has no meaning. But then again, neither does time or space or your body have any meaning either. So in a sense of ultimacy, not important, question then becomes, within a framework of the illusions of time and space, what are we to do with that concept? And the Course is always very practical. And it really just comes down to, is it helpful or not? And what we will find is that these concepts are helpful to some in some instances, and to others not. So the Course doesn't really take a strong position about what you should do if you believe in reincarnation. It takes no rule. It's not a rule. If you find it helpful, fine. If you don't find it helpful, that's fine as well. Be practical about these things. But realize that, like any belief, a belief can be weaponized and used in ways that are not helpful. So beware that that is true in this instance as well as many other instances. Let's go on.
Reincarnation would not, under any circumstances, be the problem to be dealt with now. If it were responsible for some of the difficulties the individual faces now, his task would still be only to escape from them now. If he is laying the groundwork for a future life, he can still work out his salvation only now. To some, there may be comfort in the concept, and if it heartens them, its value is self-evident. It is certain, however, that the way to salvation can be found by those who believe in reincarnation and by those who do not. The idea cannot, therefore, be regarded as essential to the curriculum. There is always some risk in seeing the present in terms of the past. There is always some good in any thought which strengthens the idea that life and the body are not the same.
Okay, so again, the idea of reincarnation, though it's not essential, it really comes down to how it is used. And that comes down to a sense of the purpose. There's always some risk in seeing the present in terms of the past, the idea of reincarnation, like your past life. So here would be an application of this, just one of many, is the belief that your past life, this would be a belief in reincarnation, that it's so, somehow affects your current reality. And so there's a risk in that belief because that enslaves your present. The belief is that your present is enslaved to your past, that there's a direct cause and effect relationship between your past and the present. And as we know, that's the error that the Course of Miracles is seeking to undo, that I am not a victim of my past, that we live only in the present, and that that's the only place we can really be free. And so there's these cautions around any concept that binds us to past beliefs. Will? You're muted, Will.
A couple of things, and actually, as you were speaking this last part here, you know, one of the things that came to mind is, and I believe it's a Buddhist concept, that we keep returning until we get it right, and then we're allowed to pass on to a higher place and not have to go back to earth and learn the lessons again. So when you talked about that piece, that's kind of what popped up for me. But you know, all of this stuff is choice. Spirituality is choice. We don't have any empirical proof that there's a God or a higher power. It's a choice we make to have a belief that makes our lives better. And I really like what they're saying about reincarnation, because it's kind of saying, you know, if it eases you in some way or believes that life is eternal, then it has a positive impact on us. So once again, I come back to these choices we have an opportunity to make in our life, some of which, you know, really pay off, and some don't. I mean, if you choose not to believe in a higher power, then you're left with dealing with all this mystery by yourself. And so I find that this is a similar kind of thing with that. You know, I do believe that there's something beyond this life. I don't know I really don't know what it is. And the reincarnation is kind of a one way to think about that. So that's my take.
Thank you. Susie?
So it's so interesting, because what comes up for me is this line: there is always some risk in seeing the present in terms of the past. I think I had this conversation with you, John, like many, many months ago. Sometimes in traffic, I get this this feeling like this, that like I've been hit by behind and I've been in some quote unquote bad car accident. I also have this like thing with my neck, like I've been strangled, and I used to say to myself, oh, this kind of must have happened in some past life, especially after I read Many Lives, Many Masters. And I think that I remember you saying to me ages ago, but, you're making, there's thought in that. I'm making thought on some level, right? And I believe it was you. So, am I bringing that thought into my mind, which will make form on some level? And so this is just a really interesting topic, or just, really hitting me on the level of just that sentence. What's the value in me even having those thoughts? Anyway, do you kind of get what I'm saying, Jonica?
Yeah, no, it's the whole undoing of the stories we tell ourselves about our past and how we are still lost our freedom in the present to our past. This is the chief error of time, is to believe that we are bound to guilt from the past and anxiety towards the future.
Right, but this isn't anything I even know that happened in this world. You know what I mean? This is just like, oh, I wonder what all that is.
You're right. It's a thought, and it all fits in that same bucket.
Yeah,
really all the same.
And it starts from like that whole reincarnation thing. Oh, what happened to me in a past life?
Right.
It's just interesting.
It is.
Thought. Yeah.
It is. It is. Thank you, Cheryl.
Thank you, Jonica. Yeah, I'm hearing two different concepts here. One is I've been accused of, and only as recently as a couple days ago, by a dear friend who I know has my best interest at heart, of living in my past, that baggage, and I've been working on that majority of my life. But sometimes when you suffer from sustained post-traumatic stress disorder, not sometimes, it's rough. But that is sort of a conscious living in my past, whereas the reincarnation, my understanding is like what Susie just alluded to, is just a feeling that you've been here before. It's subconscious. It's not like, oh, I remember in my past life I was strangled. That's not how it works. So I'm just noticing two different conversations going on here, two different concepts. I could definitely subscribe to continuing, to learn how not to live in my conscious past and like let go of the baggage and, develop my own self. Not, necessarily what I've experienced or who I've come from. But the reincarnation, so maybe you could just touch upon, that the difference, as you see it, as the Course sees it.
Yeah, I think the Course would simplify it, Cheryl, and say all notions of past narratives, some may be largely unconscious or only partially conscious. Others may be more fully developed into a long narrative about the past. All of those fundamentally are the same, which says I'm defined by what's already happened in time and in space. And even more important, I'm defined by the story I'm telling you.
Yeah.
And this is the fundamental error, that in the absence of a sense of purpose from God, the ego will rush in to fill that space with its own story. And this is the essential error. I'm going to make it up if I have to, but I'm going to come up with some story about who I am that is independent from the one the Creator gave me. And it really doesn't matter the characteristics of those stories I tell, whether I borrowed them from somewhere else, whether I made them up myself, whether I'm partially conscious or not, whether they're good or bad. They're all story making independent of what the creator has to say about us. And that's independence puts us in competition with God. In that God sees us in a light entirely different than the story we tell.
Boy, that's a long, arduous process.
Well, that's why we're here, to undo the old story making and then to make room for receiving the original state in our minds once again.
Right.
So yes, it's not an overnight undoing for sure.
Thank you.
All right, I need to move on just to cover a few more paragraphs, and those of you that I haven't gotten to, we'll get to next. David?
For our purposes, it would not be helpful to take any definite stand on reincarnation. A teacher of God should be as helpful to those who believe in it as to those who do not. If a definite stand were required of him, it would merely limit his usefulness, as well as his own decision-making. Our course is not concerned with any concept that is not acceptable to anyone, regardless of his formal beliefs. His ego will be enough for him to cope with, and it is not the part of wisdom to add sectarian controversies to his burdens. Nor would there be an advantage in his premature acceptance of the course merely because it advocates a long-held belief of his own.
Do you hear the wisdom in this? It would be helpful not to take any definite stand, because ultimately it doesn't matter. This is not essential to the curriculum of how to find inner peace. It's like any other belief. It can bind us and let us go. And so the doors are open to those who wish to believe in reincarnation, and the doors are open to those who wish not to believe in it. We're not here to divide people into groups. And by the way, we're talking about reincarnation in this particular instance, but we could come up with a long list of beliefs that people have clung to, that were passed down over the centuries. All of them fit into the same thing. They are just beliefs that we have about life and reality. And we're not excluding anybody from this program based on their position around those beliefs. To do that is to add sectarian controversies to the burden that we already bear. And as it says here, bearing the burden of your ego, Cheryl alluded to it. Boy, that's a long journey. Bearing the burden of unloading your ego is enough of a burden. We do not need to add anything else to it. That's enough of a burden. Okay, move on. David?
It cannot be too strongly emphasized that this course aims at a complete reversal of thought. When this is finally accomplished, issues such as the validity of reincarnation become meaningless. Until then, they are likely to be merely controversial. The teacher of God is therefore wise to step away from all such questions, for he has much to teach and learn apart from them. He should both learn and teach that theoretical issues but waste time, draining it away from its appointed purpose. If there are aspects to any concept or belief that will be helpful, he will be told about it. He will also be told how to use it. What more need he know?
So I really like what perspective is available here, because there's two phases in our learning journey. One is the early phase where controversies and everything, we still get a charge around controversies. We still are tempted to sink our teeth into things like that. And for the teacher of God, it's wise to step away from all those controversies. There's so much else that matters to our learning journey. And if we're to deal with all these theoretical issues, we're just going to lose track of the real purpose here, which is to find inner peace. So in those early phases, this is easy, just say no, just step away from the controversies and let it go. Don't engage in the boxing match of who's right and who's right. It's theoretical, and this course is not intended to be a debate about theories. Your inner peace, your happiness has nothing to do with a theory. And then the second phase of that is once we've kind of gone through all this undoing that Cheryl said is a long process, where we've really let go our storytelling, our making up our own meaning, and where there's a complete reversal of thought. And when that's accomplished, the issues about reincarnation and all these other theories really become meaningless. They have no value at all. So that's when we're really free. You can tell when you're really free. That's when you really don't have a judgment one way or another. It has no meaning to you. Richie, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, hi guys. Yeah, this really resonates with me. And I feel funny now because I'm calling my name Richard. And there's a shift, there's a detachment from my old self and my old, I would say, patterns. And I don't know if there's a change, but there's a shift in perception with the reincarnation. And I believe, for me, it's been presented through even a religion, through death on the cross and reincarnation, being born again. It's easier said than done. And the nice thing about this work, it's assisting me in finding that. It just doesn't happen because I say something. It's got to be almost a 24/7. It's a challenge because I have nothing to hang on to. It takes me out of the world of physicality, even though I need my computers and this and that. It's not my identity. So I'm losing that, and it's kind of scary because I'm finding out I'm not who I made myself out to be.
Yeah.
So it's not, there's nothing that can, there is nothing that I can, after knowing this, in other words, the cat is out of the bag. It's for me to understand this and work with the shift.
Nice.
I'm not here to be a better person. If I'm here to be a better person, then I'm using a judgment.
Right.
I'm here to change. So there is really no frame of reference. And as I do that, the narrative changes because there really isn't any past. And you guys have taught me that there's no future, there's no past, there's no time. And if I understand that, then this takes me and puts me in the moment.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. Thank you, Richie. That's lovely.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so let's not waste time with theoretical issues or sectarian controversies.
Does this mean that the teacher of God should not believe in reincarnation himself or discuss it with others who do? The answer is certainly not. If he does believe in reincarnation, it would be a mistake for him to renounce the belief unless his internal teacher so advised. And this is most unlikely. He might be advised that he is misusing the belief in some way that is detrimental to his pupil's advance or his own. Reinterpretation would then be recommended because it is necessary. All that must be recognized, however, is that birth was not the beginning and death is not the end. Yet even this much is not required of the beginner. He need merely accept the idea that what he knows is not necessarily all there is to learn. His journey has begun.
I think it says it so simply. All that needs to be recognized is that your birth into a body was not the beginning of you, nor is your passing of the body through the portal of death the end of you. And that recognition is that you are an eternal being that exists before birth on this earth and long after death on this earth is the crucial issue. But in terms of what do you do with this belief with reincarnation, I think this is the best advice right here. It would be a mistake for him to renounce the belief unless his eternal teacher so advised. And this is what you can generalize that advice to any belief about yourself, the world, your culture, your ethnicity, whatever. It would be a mistake to renounce those beliefs unless the Holy Spirit was working with you for that purpose. And so then we come back to what we always do in this course is inner listening to spiritual guidance is the foundation for it all. Trust spiritual guidance. Joy?
Thank you. The sentence that stood out to me so loud and clear is about renouncing a belief when the internal teacher guides us to do that. And it made me think about all these beliefs that I have that I'm walking around that are running my life, and how I'm so happy to be a student of the course because I want my everyday habit of life to see these beliefs and just simply take them to my internal teacher and ask, what is this for? And allow the answers to come to me rather than these beliefs just running the show and running me amok and screwing up my life. So this has really been helpful for me to be going over this, and thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you, Joya. That's really clear. You can almost imagine it like every one of us is carrying a big sack of beliefs and stories about ourselves, about our relationships, the meaning of life, the world, and God included, this big heavy sack. And now imagine you're trying to literally climb up a ladder with one hand holding onto that sack. It's heavy and it impedes our progress. And the course is very gentle, so it won't force you to do anything that you're not willing to do. But eventually you realize there's nothing in that sack I need. There's really nothing. And that's when we become completely free, as we let go of all the beliefs that we taught ourselves and rely solely on the guidance of the Holy Spirit on a moment-by-moment basis. Susie?
It reminds me of what's coming up to me is today's lesson, that God did not create a meaningless world, and that and I can substitute false or loveless, or, you know, if I have problems with the word meaningless. And if I believe that only love is real, then all of these beliefs that I have had for years are just false beliefs that I have made up. And I love what you just said. The Course doesn't force anything because it's taken years. I intellectually have always understood it, but I really, in the depths of me, believe it now. You know, God did not create war. God did not create hunger. So even the things I was talking about, like being strangled or whatever, even if I did have that in a prior life, that's not created by God. That would have been some trauma, the same thing that I can consciously remember in this life, it would be the same thing in a past life. So it's exactly the same. None of it is real. Only love is real. So I just have to keep saying that to myself every time I have one of these crazy beliefs that I've have in my, repertoire from years of life, that it's not created by God. It's made by Susie. Anyway, that's it. Thanks.
Thank you. I just wanted to point out in Susie's comments there, she illustrated one of the fundamental teachings of this course, and that is to learn to recognize what is the same and what is different. And what ultimately we learn is that all illusions, no matter what form they may take, no matter how long we've been carrying them, all illusions, and that's beliefs and attitudes that we've acquired, all of them are the same. They are but heavy weights on a sack that slow down our progress. And so learning that allows us to then make the distinction between what's different from an illusion. Because until you recognize all illusions are the same, you cannot recognize that the truth is different than the illusion, that its source is different, that its effect is different, that its impact on your living is different. So, in summary, learning to distinguish between what's the same and what's different. And we're speaking in abstract terms because it applies to everything. All my judgments of other people are the same. They're my own tendency to condemn projected outward towards others. It's always the same. All judgments are the same, not just myself, but all of us. And so that is one of the fundamental purposes of the Course of Miracles, is to teach you to recognize, as the Holy Spirit would see it, what is the same and what is different. Said another way, what comes from heaven and what was made by you in fear of hell. Richie?
Yeah, what I'm getting to for me is the untethered soul. I don't need an illusion or anything in the world of physicality to prove that I'm real.
Right.
One of the things that I've worked on, and it still comes back, is trauma. And by doing this work, what you're saying now, what the book is saying, what we're sharing, this lets go of a lot of the trauma that I've been carrying around with myself, the emotional stuff. And I just feel like, wow, like, hey, and I believe that's the inner peace, is letting go. For me, part of the inner peace, anyway, is learning to let go of that, the shift. So that's where I'm at. When I'm
Indeed.
picking up on this, this is terrific. I really needed this.
Good, good. I'm glad you find it helpful. All right, we're going to finish up this section. David?
The emphasis of this course always remains the same. It is at this moment that complete salvation is offered you, and it is at this moment that you can accept it. This is still your one responsibility. Atonement might be equated with total escape from the past and total lack of interest in the future. Heaven is here. There is nowhere else. Heaven is now. There is no other time. No teaching that does not lead to this is of concern to God's teachers. All beliefs will point to this if properly interpreted. In this sense, it can be said that their truth lies in their usefulness. All beliefs that lead to progress should be honored. This is the sole criterion this course requires. No more than this is necessary.
I think this paragraph is worth reviewing again after class or sometime during the week, because it really says very succinctly what is different about this course and these teachings. The emphasis remains the same. Salvation is available to you right now in this moment, and you can accept it. You have to learn to accept peace in the moment. You have to learn to be tranquil and calm under all condition. It's your one responsibility, and it is predicated or conditioned upon your total escape from the past and your total lack of interest in fabricating a future or having anxiety about a future. When you are free of escaped from the past and are free of fabricating future scenarios, then you are free. And until then, you're not free. And when you are free, then you would have made room in your mind to experience enduring peace. There is no other path to being in the now. So, is reincarnation so? It really doesn't matter. Those are theoretical issues that we're not going to lose time with. If it's helpful to you at this time, fine. And if it's not, that's fine too. Follow inner guidance. Your inner teacher will tell you what you need to focus on at any given time. Okay, then that was section 24. We're going to move on to section 25. These are specialty topics, by the way, because reincarnation to some people doesn't mean anything at all, and you don't think about it. Others, it means a lot to. So what I would say, they apply to some, but not to all. But in the sense of a manual for teachers, it's quite likely that you will in time encounter people that are struggling with these theoretical issues. And the question is, how do we react to them? And it should be clear from what we just read is our purpose is not to attack the issues or attack the people who believe in those issues. This program is much more gentle, and no one will let go of an issue they believe in until they're ready. That's simply the truth. So now we have another specialty topic, which has to do with psychic powers and broadly speaking, powers that are attributable to, this would be the belief in powers that are attributable to the mind that are not well understood in broadly and in general. They're often thought to be special powers that some have. So the question is, from the Course's point of view, are these desirable? Is these things we should seek out? Should we cultivate these? Should we utilize these? What should we do with psychic powers? David?
Are psychic powers desirable? The answer to this question is much like the preceding one. There are, of course, no unnatural powers, and is obviously merely an appeal to magic to make up a power that does not exist. It is equally obvious, however, that each individual has many abilities of which he is unaware. As his awareness increases, he may well develop abilities that seem quite startling to him. Yet nothing he can do can compare even in the slightest with the glorious surprise of remembering who he is. Let all his learning and all his efforts be directed toward this one great final surprise, and he will not be content to be delayed by the little ones that may come to him on the way.
Mm-hmm. So there's a thread in here that exists throughout the Course in Miracles, and it views these things in terms of abilities, that we all, each individual, has many abilities of which he is unaware. These are unconscious abilities or undeveloped. And as you unload the baggage from your belief sack of beliefs, as you unload that, your awareness increases, and you may then develop abilities that are not familiar to you or to others. And these abilities we're going to find, can be used for good. But they all pale in significance. They're not to be elevated to the level of specialness, where we start to admire those who demonstrate the abilities and feel somehow less if we don't have the abilities ourselves. They're not to be done with that. In fact, all abilities cannot even begin to compare with the fundamental remembrance of who you are in the Creator's mind. Said another way, there's not a single ability that will appear on earth in comparison with how you were created and what you are and the awareness of that. All other things are but little stuff. Cheryl?
Sounds to me that it might fall under the category of false prophets. Believing in something, whether it be, psychics or reincarnation or whatever, any of these topics, it's really interchangeable, as opposed to believing in, your creator, your higher power, or whatever you decide to call your God. It just sounds like just the world and civilization has always been grappling with that, trying to find something as an answer, whereas the answer is, in our creator, as we're supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
So that just sounds like that to me.
Yeah. And there will always be this is under the idea of ego specialness, that I'm special, I'm different. There'll always be those who seek to create that impression on others and even profit by it, to be exalted and profit, and who will claim divine specialness. I have a special gift from God there. So there will always be those that do that. And the Course warns us this is the idea of specialness. So this is, it's all these are different versions of the flavor of specialness.
Thank you.
Thank you. Julie from Virginia.
Yeah, I'm thinking too, it's probably good to go back to center and be cautious of judging something that we might tell a story to ourselves doesn't appeal to us, because the proof is really in the experience of the child of God, herself or himself. So for example, I'm not a devout follower of the teachings of Edgar Cayce, but that seems to me to be a little bit of a parallel path. And I certainly take what I like and leave the rest. And, there certainly are some people that really believe and teach and learn, what was produced by Edgar Cayce as we do with the Course. And so I find that for me, whenever I'm in a position of unequality, of saying something is either exalted or less than, I have to watch it regardless of where I fall on that.
Good catch, Julie. Good catch, because that's what we always do is we come up with our position regarding anything and become convinced that our position is somehow more correct than others. And yes, we should, we would call that a temptation to believe that in our ability to judge these things accurately. And the truth of it is, we really don't have all the information in front of us to make those judgments. Heather? You're muted.
Yeah, I'm just realizing that all these things are just another face for separation. It's a way to separate us from each other. It's a way to separate people with different beliefs. And so it's all under the guise of another way to separate from everybody else.
Yeah. Oh, that's really good. You just did it right there, Heather. You saw that they're all the same techniques of separating. And that lens of knowing what will mislead us, what are fabrications and illusions, will save you a great deal, because now we no longer need to spend time judging it, the particulars of it, the nuances of it. The Course teaches the Holy Spirit dismisses everything that is not true as simply meaningless and loses no time on it beyond that, just dismisses it with one sweep of the arm. Susie.
That's where the lesson comes. There are no small upsets and there's no order in degrees of difficulty with miracles. There are just no small upsets. They're all the same. Yeah. And there it is again.
Right. There it is again. Right.
We're either in love or we're not.
Right. Right. Yeah. Good catch. All right, let's go on.
Certainly, there are many psychic powers that are clearly in line with this course. Communication is not limited to the small range of channels the world recognizes. If it were, there would be little point in trying to teach salvation. It would be impossible to do so. The limits the world places on communication are the chief barriers to direct experience of the Holy Spirit, whose presence is always there and whose voice is available but for the hearing. These limits are placed out of fear, for without them, the walls that surround all the separate places of the world would fall at the holy sound of his voice. Who transcends these limits in any way is merely becoming more natural. He is doing nothing special, and there is no magic in his accomplishments.
This paragraph is really worth looking at again later on so that you understand it. It can open up really everything that we need to know about this. So certainly, we called it abilities before, others would call it psychic powers. Certainly, there are many abilities that are clearly in line with this course. Things that are not widely recognized, that might seem way out of the ordinary, and that would be a tendency to marvel at. And with many of you, I've had synchronicities where we were both thinking the same thing, and one of us texted a message to the other person. You said, I was just thinking that right now. Synchronicities, that's not a big deal. And there's a bigger, so not an iceberg is not the right metaphor. You know how an iceberg under the water, there's a lot more going on underneath the water than what you can see above the water. And it says that in our world, the idea of communicating of one mind to another is not limited to the channels that we recognize. Like right now, we're doing verbal communication, and there's also reading, and there's also sign language or other kinesthetic motions that would communicate. Communication is not limited to those physical phenomena. In fact, the Holy Spirit has a wide variety of communication tools, and we will review them in some detail in chapters 2 and 3 of the textbook. So we'll save that for another day. The 9 methods of communication that are talked about in the Course of Miracles. But this, you should know, is that shutting our minds off from those other unfamiliar forms of communication, that's the chief barrier to experiencing the Holy Spirit, is to shut your mind off from its, and believe, to insist that it's only the communication methods that I'm willing to recognize. And everything else I'm closed-minded towards. That is the chief barrier to direct experience of the Holy Spirit, who has methods of communicating that are not recognized by the world at large. And so we need to be open-minded to these things. Why do we place those limits on communication? Because we're afraid, because we don't understand, because we prefer to build walls that keep the message of our holiness out of our minds. And this course is for the purpose of transcending those limits, moving beyond the limits that the world teaches about communications, so that you open your mind to receiving the voice from the Holy Spirit in a way that is not commonly practiced. Heather?
Yeah, this is so helpful, because what I really got from what you're saying is that we get, for me, I get hung up on the word hearing, because, hearing and a voice, it's like some kind of faculty that I know and I'm expecting to come in a certain way. And this is saying that the Holy Spirit speaks in many ways. And so we need to not be listening for that voice and think other people hear it and I don't, so something's wrong with me. It's completely conveyed in some other way. And that's what this is opening us up to say. She can communicate in many ways. But if we think it's going to be a voice, we may be missing it. We communicate it all the time. We may be missing it because we don't hear something. So I love the idea that there's all these other faculties and ways that the Holy Spirit can communicate to us, but we can't get fixated on the idea that it's a voice that we're going to hear or experience, or that we just aren't good enough. That's why we're not advanced enough to hear it yet, that we got hung up on the whole idea that it's an actual voice. So I just really love that it made that very clear.
Yeah. Thank you for underscoring that, Heather. David Schneider?
I'm going to restate something that I said a couple of years ago, I think, in the course. And that is, if I told you, a person, that there are thousands upon thousands of voices and musical instruments playing all around you, and yet you hear none of them, would you believe me? Who knows? But the whole concept here is that, and I said, we are like a radio. We have a tower, a tuning tower. And if we pick up and tune in on what's going on around us, then we can focus on that particular wavelength and receive the message. If I don't tune in, and I think this is what the course teaches me, is how to tune in to truth, then I will hear, then I will be communicated with. And these are not psychic powers. These are just powers of attention. And I think it's very important. And we were talking, several people earlier were talking about, oh, these are techniques of separation. And I would say just the opposite. These are techniques of union, not separation.
Nice. I like that, techniques of union. Very good. Richard? You're muted.
What I'm getting that resonates with me, and I believe I'm settling with this. It's not the words, the message is subliminal. And I can only contaminate it by attempting to explain it. And that's it.
Yeah. Well, it is true that our words are symbols of ideas, which are symbols of reality. Yeah, and so we recognize that words are not pure forms of communication. However, at the same time, we also, from a practical point of view, recognize that it's one of the tools we have to connect with each other, but it's certainly not the ultimate form of communication. Thank you, Richard. Let's go on.
The seemingly new abilities that may be gathered on the way can be very helpful. Given to the Holy Spirit and used under his direction, they are valuable teaching aids. To this, the question of how they arise is irrelevant. The only important consideration is how they are used. Taking them as ends in themselves, no matter how this is done, will delay progress. Nor does their value lie in proving anything. Achievements from the past, unusual attunement with the unseen, or special favors from God. God gives no special favors, and no one has any powers that are not available to everyone. Only by tricks of magic are special powers demonstrated.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so now we're talking about the beginning appearances of these abilities. As David said, that they are ways of tuning in to our union with the one mind, and they are learned abilities. In every case, you learn to use these abilities in a ways that can be very helpful, and particularly for the teachers of God, when we give them to the Holy Spirit and we use these abilities under his direction, not when we use them to puff up ourselves and to make money and to build up a strong ego, but when we use them in conjunction with the Holy Spirit under his direction, they will be important. So the only consideration really is how they're used. And there's no reason to start telling stories about how talented I am, how special I am, because I've developed these abilities. That's completely getting lost in the ego trap. They're simply abilities that we have developed. In fact, we will read in other places, eventually these abilities appear in everyone. When we say eventually, we're not necessarily referring to while you're still here on Earth in this form, but eventually everyone develops these abilities because they're abilities to communicate. And the intention here is that we all have the limits that we place on communication. As they fall away, the abilities rise and everyone develops them. So there's no specialness in these abilities. Some may acquire them a little sooner than others, but that time is not meaningful. Susie?
Well, there are two very specific lessons that almost teach us this, that we have no private thoughts. And I am not at the effect, I am not alone at the effects of somebody else's thoughts. So the Course is telling us even that we are going, that we have no private thoughts. So this is all, so all of us are gonna, when we finally understand that lesson or come to believe that it's true, I say to David all the time, you have no private thoughts. What's going on, and, or like you just said, you'll text at the same exact time. And that's that lesson. We have no private thoughts.
Yeah. Thank you. All right, let's go on here.
I have to smile because I was thinking that same lesson before Susie brought it up about we have no private thoughts.
Right.
Nothing that is genuine is used to deceive. The Holy Spirit is incapable of deception, and he can use only genuine abilities. What is used for magic is useless to him, but what he uses cannot be used for magic. There is, however, a particular appeal in unusual abilities that can be curiously tempting. Here are strengths which the Holy Spirit wants and needs, yet the ego sees in these same strengths an opportunity to glorify itself. Strengths turned to weakness are tragedy indeed, yet what is not given to the Holy Spirit must be given to weakness, for what is withheld from love is given to fear and will be fearful in consequence.
So make sure that lands, that any ability, we're talking about abilities to tune in to the one mind of creation and therefore have shared thoughts with the Holy Spirit and with others, that any ability that is not given to the Holy Spirit, then who are you going to give that ability to if you don't give it to the Holy Spirit? You're going to use it as an opportunity for the ego to glorify itself, is the only other choice. This is what's different. All abilities given to the Holy Spirit are used for the same purpose. If you don't give it to the Holy Spirit, it's used for a different purpose. And that is the ego to glorify itself. And with that will come a sense of uncertainty and anxiety and fear, and leads one down into a path of confusion about self and others. that ultimately is the whole point of this course, is to undo that confusion. David?
Yeah, like to comment. Did we read chapter 23?
We did not.
Okay. I would highly recommend that to people. It was helpful to me. And we talked earlier, somebody mentioned something about false prophets and people doing things in deception and false. And I love this sentence: nothing that is genuine is used to deceive. There are many prophets who are true prophets, who are realized individuals, who are the teachers of God, as they say in the manual, and that what they say is genuine. And I have to be careful not to dismiss somebody just because they don't represent who I think should be the Holy Spirit representative. And I just think, this is a really, really important concept here. And I'd highly recommend reading that chapter before, especially for anybody who has an issue with the human manifestation of whom we refer to as Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, so David, just for those of you who don't have the reference point, Teacher's Manual section 23 is entitled, "Does Jesus Have a Special Place in Healing?" And I just heard an appeal to let's cover that in a future session. So we'll manage to work it in. I'm going to have not be able to get all the sections in on the Teacher's Manual. So thank you, David, for the special appeal to do that section. I guess we'll do it tomorrow. All right, we're going to move on. There we go.
Even those who no longer value the material things of the world may still be deceived by psychic powers. As investment has been withdrawn from the world's material gifts, the ego has been seriously threatened. It may still be strong enough to rally under this new temptation to win back strength by guile. Many have not seen through the ego's defenses here, although they are not particularly subtle. Yet given a remaining wish to be deceived, deception is made easy. Now the power is no longer a genuine ability and cannot be used dependably. It is almost inevitable that unless the individual changes his mind about its purpose, he will bolster his power's uncertainties with increasing deception.
So this is referring to where one is struggling between having developed some abilities, but still being tempted to use it to glorify the ego, where one may be deceived by psychic powers, and where one has made some progress in withdrawing preoccupation with material gifts, which really threatens the ego, that those things are not all important, but is still not completely free. It says listen to these words: the ego, may still be strong enough to rally under the new temptation of the belief in abilities. In other words, the ego's had a serious setback because we've withdrawn emptied the sack of our attitudes and beliefs and limitations partially, but it still has an opportunity to rally under a new temptation where we develop abilities we didn't have before. Many have not seen through the ego's defenses here. So David and others were referring to false prophets. Many get caught up in this level and are not particularly subtle. So we're not going to speak about all the examples of that. Yet, if they still have a wish to be deceived, you can be sure that that path will open to them and deception will be easy. Now, the psychic power no longer is perceived as a genuine ability and cannot be used dependably. Why? Because the individual has gotten caught up in the rally of the ego and has pulled that ability back into using it as a tool to glorify the ego. So this is a struggle. Many have not seen through the ego's defenses here. So we're not saying that this path is not without its temptations, but one thing is true: when you've been warned ahead of time about the traps and the temptations along the way, it makes it a lot easier when that arises in your mind and crosses your mind to go that way. You realize, ooh, that doesn't feel right to me. That feels like specialness arising up. And when that happens, you know not to keep it to yourself, but immediately, instantly turn to the Holy Spirit and say, Holy Spirit, I offer these thoughts up to you for healing. I would not keep them for myself. So be not deceived by your own temptation to let the ego rally again. By the way, as an aside, this is not from the course, everybody's ego will attempt to rally from time to time. All right. It's just part of you. It would be unimaginable if your ego did not attempt to rally. I mean, that's its purpose, is to try to keep, now having won a degree of control and influence in your life, it's determined to keep that. So be prepared for that. Cheryl?
You know, when you talk about temptation and ego, after many years of saying the Lord's Prayer, you know, lead me not into temptation, but deliver me from evil. What temptation has become to me, and especially of late, is ego. Everything that my ego leads me to is evil. And, you know, so I just, lead me not into temptation, say that 10 times quick, but deliver me from evil. Every time I say that, I think, just please, please, God, don't let my ego rule me anymore. Don't let that be my higher power, because it makes me so miserable. Anyway.
Yeah, we'll have a lot more elaboration on that, Cheryl, in chapter 2 of the textbook. What do we do when we're assaulted with those temptations? Where are the boundaries and the lanes that we can trust? And that chapter 2, I think, is one of the most effective ways at instructing us on those matters. Okay, so we're going to wrap it up here with this last paragraph.
Any ability that anyone develops has the potentiality for good. To this, there is no exception. And the more unusual and unexpected the power, the greater its potential usefulness. Salvation has need of all abilities. For what the world would destroy, the Holy Spirit would restore. Psychic abilities have been used to call upon the devil, which merely means to strengthen the ego. Yet here is also a great channel of hope and healing in the Holy Spirit's service. Those who have developed psychic powers have simply let some of the limitations they laid upon their minds be lifted. It can be but further limitations they lay upon themselves if they utilize their increased freedom for greater imprisonment. The Holy Spirit needs these gifts, and those who offer them to him and him alone go with Christ's gratitude upon their hearts and his holy sight not far behind.
Mhm, mhm. So this is a really excellent summary. The Holy Spirit needs these gifts, and any ability, I really believe this is in the broadest sense, any ability that anyone develops has the potentiality for good. So let's just go through a few things. Can music be used for good? Can art be used for good? Can someone's ability in construction be used for good? Can someone's ability in healthcare be used for good? Can an auto mechanic use his abilities for good? I think it just goes on and on and on. Yes, of course, these are gifts that we develop, and when we turn and there's no exception to that list. Salvation has a need of all these abilities. It's the ability to help one another and create a more just and loving world. So avoid the temptation to view those abilities in terms of the ego, and instead, as we said a moment ago, turn to the Holy Spirit and offer the gifts to be used for good. And so here's a few final thoughts. Those who have developed these powers, these abilities, all they've really done is let some of the limitations that we place upon our minds be lifted. Everyone has these abilities to communicate with the one mind of creation, but not everyone has chosen to allow the limitations to be lifted. And so that's what this course is about, is lifting the limitations that the world that we have placed upon ourselves, and then as we are willing to lift those limitations, the Holy Spirit uses the gifts in ways that would surprise us. We would even call them miracles. Okay, that's as far as we're going to read today. We will continue on Sunday and then finish up on Monday. Based on David's request, we'll go back and do section 23 tomorrow, and then move on to another section after that. We'll do about 2 sections per session. I want to thank you, David, for reading. Thank you all for your comments. And also wanted to, let's see, is Justin still here? No, I think he's had to drop off. So just thank you all for being a part of this. You have tremendous abilities to communicate your one mind to another. And we know that over time, we're all going to develop those abilities by letting go of our limitations. Thank you. Namaste.
Namaste. Hey, Jonica.
Thank you.
Chapter 2. It's a great line. I just happened to open it to it. The correction of fear is your responsibility.
Yes. Yes, that's that was what I was thinking, somewhat along that line after Cheryl commented. I said
Right.
there's very specific directions. Chapter 2 for me is one of the clearest chapters on what do we do when we are afraid. And
Right.
so
Are
we'll be
you,
Right.
covering that soon.
are you referring to chapter 2 in the manual for teachers or another
No,
chapter
The
2?
text, the text.
Okay, thank you.